Washington Journal continues.
Daniel Ayalon has represented Israel here in the United States for just over 2 years, and he's joining us this morning to talk about U.S. policy in the Middle East, in particular the Israeli peace process. But I want to begin by asking you about Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. There continue to be stories about whether or not he has firm control in the parliament. How long do you think, does he have firm control in the parliament, or do you see any situation in which Benjamin Netanyahu or somebody else would take over as the Israeli Prime Minister?
Well, Steve, good morning, and it's good to be here. The situation in Israel politically has always been very animated. We are a very vibrant democracy with everyone has a voice, and it's ongoing. No, he has a full control over the cabinet, the government, and also the parliament. Although it is not inconceivable that we may have to go for reshuffling of the cabinet or even new elections if the situation will demand. I hope this will not be the case, because it is imperative that a government in Jerusalem or in any other capital would be able and could be able to effect its policies. The policy of Prime Minister Sharon has been for this disengagement. He wants to really give peace a chance. He would really like to embark on a political dialogue, a peaceful negotiations with the Palestinians, and go on with the roadmap. And the way to do it probably is by the disengagement, allowing to find a new partner, a reliable partner on the Palestinian side. If he cannot go with that, he will have to find some political ways so the political landscape in Israel would allow going on with these policies.
Some critics on both sides have said that the only way this peace process between the Israeli and the Arabs will get underway is if Ariel Sharon and Yasser Arafat are not at the table.
Well, I would say half of it is true. Arafat has been proving himself to be not worthy of any trust. He has been bent on terrorism throughout the process. He is the one who perfected hijacking of airplanes in the 60s, late 60s, and then the killing of our sportsmen in Munich, and suicide bombing today. He is a terrorist, and he finances and he authorizes and he supports terrorism. This is not the case. We have an elected prime minister in a democratic process who has been proving himself that he is willing to go a long way in order to make peace. He is willing for painful concessions for us. He is now the first Israeli prime minister that has authorized the pullback, the evacuation of Jewish communities in Gaza and parts of the West Bank in order to try and jumpstart the political process in the Middle East.
But they strike, you strike back, the cycle continues. When will it end?
Steve, this is really a misnomer. It's not a cycle of violence. There is one side which is aggressor, which perpetrates terrorism, which directs it only at children and civilians, school buses. Just last week we have a horrible attack on 2 buses in Jerusalem, 16 civilians killed. And then you have us, the Israelis, who are defending ourselves and are hunting only those who kill us. So you cannot really compare between the two, not on a moral basis, not on a practical basis.
But whether you want to call it a cycle or the pattern, the fact is that both sides, the animosity is deep-rooted. What is it going to take? I mean, it's the question that I know has been talked about and debated for 50 years, but what will it take to resolve the situation?
It will take new leadership upon the Palestinians, who is once and for all accepting in the fullest sense Israel's birthright to be there in our historic homeland, who is willing to make the compromises, to make the concessions that they will have to make also, so the two parties can come to the table and resolve all issues. We were on the verge of such historic breakthrough 4 years ago when Prime Minister Barak offered Arafat a far-reaching, a generous offer, and was not taken. Not only it was not taken, then the violence started by the Palestinians. So it's not a situation that all of a sudden it erupted. There was one aggressor side, which were the Palestinians, and one side which is keep defending ourselves. And this is very, very clear. And once the Palestinians realize that terrorism will not yield them any benefits, that it will not give them any political rewards or anything else, when there will be enough political pressure internationally that they understand that they stand to lose, I believe then, with the violence down, then we can reason with one another and find an honorable and just solution with security for all.
Daniel Ayalon is the Israeli ambassador to the United States. He's from Tel Aviv, studied here in the United States at the University of Bowling Green, been in that position as the Israeli ambassador since July of 2002. On to your phone calls. Atlanta, good morning.
Stanford's a pretext for war. Israel's no democracy. They don't treat the Israeli Arabs inside the Green Line the same way. There are Israeli Arabs living in ghettos. No Israeli Jew lives like that. The gist of the terror problem in Israel is the illegal land grab, the apartheid wall, and your continued settlement building. You're just
Thank you, caller.
Well, I would invite your caller to come to Israel. I hope he could do it any time, and he will find that Israel not only is a democracy, it's a vibrant democracy. Some say it's more democracy than a democracy. People have equal rights with equal opportunities, including the Arab population. Israel is a country of 6.5 million, about 1 million are Arabs, and they live very peacefully, very honorably. They are voting, they are elected to the Knesset. 10 or 11 members of our Knesset are Arabs, and I will invite him to go and visit. And we are very proud of our pluralism, we are very proud of our democracy and of what we believe in, and we are also proud that we are able to protect it, and we will always defend it.
Next call comes to us from Brooklyn, New York. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to ask the ambassador when Israel intends to stop expanding its settlement activity in the West Bank.
Well, thank you. Well, it has already did so. Not only stopped the expansions, but also, as we mentioned earlier to Steve, Prime Minister Sharon is willing and has authorized the pulling back of permanent Jewish communities, 21 in Gaza, few more in the West Bank. So we are doing more than our share for confidence-building measures. We are taking the steps to move towards political dialogue. And in the past, when we had serious leaders and interlocutors, whether it was in Egypt or Jordan, we did take a lot of concessions and we signed peace treaty, both with Egypt and in Jordan. This is still the case with the Palestinians, as it has been proven throughout the Oslo process, which culminated in the Barak offer in 2000 in Camp David, which unfortunately not only was not taken by Arafat and this Palestinian leadership, but then they began attacking us.
Geographically, Israel about the same size as New Jersey. How large is the Gaza Strip and the West Bank?
Oh, these are very small, and you have to understand, Israel, the whole area, is really a sliver in the Middle East. We make up less than 1% of the entire territory in the Middle East. So it is sometimes inconceivable to think that the conflict is about territory, because the territory is very small. And this is what people have to understand. The conflict is about Israel's survival and Israel's existence there, our right to be there in our historic place. And once the Arabs do understand it, I think then every other dispute, including territorial disputes, can be solved.
Akron, Ohio, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, C-SPAN, for the sausage-making of democracy. Mr. Ayalon, you indicated your first statement was that Israel is a democracy. I disagree with that. You have occupied the territory for over 20 years. I think the only solution to the Middle East problem is that you either decide to annex that property and allow those people to vote when you're outnumbered 9 or 10 to 1, or remove yourself from that area. The problem is not going to be solved until you really give true democracy to the area you occupy. It's unconscionable for you to continue to occupy that land for 20-some years and not give those people the right to vote.
Thank you. We'll get another comment from Springfield, Illinois. Good morning.
I'm calling here for Mr. Ambassador. I would like to know exactly, the current administration has accused Saddam Hussein of violating UN resolution. There were about 16, 15, less than 20 of them. And historically, Israel has violated maybe hundreds of UN resolutions. And every time that there is a violation from Israel, the U.S. administration has given a veto. It's not, an unfair situation when accusing Saddam of violating, and I don't agree with Saddam either because he was a bad guy, but at the same time there were other bad guys that the Bush administration and the previous administration that supported around the world, like Mobutu of Congo, for instance, where the Bush had even family ties and all. But I would like just to know, to focus really, why is it that at some point we support, like, say Saddam violated UN resolutions?
Thank you, caller. There's a lot there. How do you respond?
Yes, well, first to your first caller, I would set the record straight. He's right. We've been in these territories which are under dispute. He said 20 years. It's more than 20 years. It's since 1967. And it's time to put to rest all this historic myth that we have been occupying there. We have to remember, we have obtained these territories in Gaza and also in the West Bank following the Six-Day War, which was a war of aggression against us. We took this territory, let's say the West Bank, from Jordan. There was not a Palestinian state ever in history. Never mind that, we are willing for many concessions and to pull out and create an independent Palestinian state for the first time in history. We have been supporting President Bush's two-state solution and his 24th of June speech for that. But you have to remember, even before we had these territories, terror ensued, and terror happened there by Palestinian terror organizations. So it's not a matter of us pulling out and hoping for the best. We would pull out and we would have an agreement once we know we will not be attacked from the territories we are living. And we are ready for far-reaching concessions, as has been proven in 2000, as is proven now by the disengagement plan of Prime Minister Sharon. And once we have a partner with whom we can negotiate and can trust, and terror will subside, then everything is possible. About your second caller with the UN, well, there is a big difference between UN resolutions against Iraq and against Israel. The resolutions against Iraq were UN Security Council, which are enforceable, which are the law of in the international arena, whereby the resolutions against Israel are General Assembly, which are not legally binding. And if you look at the composition of General Assembly with 192 countries, more half of them are not democratic, and where you see that the Arab majority there, you know that every resolution and every text, the most extreme one, that the Palestinians introduce in the General Assembly is accepted, and of course it's biased, and as I said, it's not legal. On the contrary, in the United Nations Security Council, all resolutions there, Israel are abiding by. There is 242, 338, and we have accepted it. There was 425 resolution, which called for the evacuation of Lebanon. We have done that. The Syrians have not done it. Not only they are still occupying Lebanon, but also they are supporting the Hezbollah, which against the Taif agreement is the only terror organization that has not been disbanded or disarmed. So as you see, if there is a double standard, the double standard is against Israel.
Daniel Ayalon had served as a member of the delegation at the Camp David negotiations in 2000 with then-President Bush. He was a foreign policy advisor to Prime Ministers Ehud Barak, Benjamin Netanyahu, and now Ariel Sharon. He also served his country in Panama and is currently the Israeli ambassador here in Washington, D.C. Cherry Hill, New Jersey is next. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Ambassador. I have a question further to what you said about Israel's position in the UN. Well, I guess first is what is Israel doing to make its position better with respect to joining the Western European groups or other groups that don't have regional restrictions against Israel from joining any the organizations of the UN. But my other question is really Israel gets no support in the UN from any countries that Israel seems to have good, deep relationships with, such as Turkey. There's a military relationship. Russia. There's certainly a cultural relationship with Israel, and India, which is selling the Falcon, as you know. So what can Israel do to better its position and use leverage of these countries to get them own support for Israel?
Thank you.
Yes, well, what we can do is simply talk and explain our position, but it doesn't always help. In the UN, unfortunately, quantity does make quality. And it is true that Israel is a country which cannot really participate fully within all the procedures and the rulings of the UN. Israel is being discriminated against. We do not belong to any geographic area. Naturally, we should be in the Asian area, but unfortunately, where there are some countries there who who block our entry to this group, it is very difficult. So we would like to join the WEOG, which is the Western European, which is not a geographic basis for this grouping, but more an ideological one based on democratic laws, open markets. And we have joined the WEOG in a limited way. We would like to expand that, and there are negotiations underway, and I hope one day we'll be able to join not just the WEOG, but also our regional group as we deserve.
Good morning to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Good morning. Mr. Ayalon, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm sorry.
Ayalon, go ahead, please.
The United States and Russia had 4 simulated earthquake drills. 3 in Vladivostok, Russia. It's on the Pacific. 1 in Hawaii. Check with Russia or America.
And your point is what, caller?
In your Tel Aviv, you have earthquakes recorded. Algiers has had 6,000 people killed, and a place called Bam in Iran had around 42,000. More people have been killed, not by the Israelis, but by the Arab nation leaders of hatred. They have turned their backs on help that could have been saved their own people. Has this ever been brought up to your peace negotiators?
Thank you.
Well, I would say to all who say that instability prevails in the Middle East, well, they're right. And why is this instability? Well, really, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict certainly is part of it, but it's not the focal point. And if you look through history, there have been problems there where countries invade other countries, Iraq invading Kuwait, Syria invading Lebanon. All these things had nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Iran-Iraq war, which resulted with more than 1 million casualties. Back in the 60s, there were wars going on in Yemen with Egyptian troops involved. So it is true that the Middle East throughout the history was rife with violence and wars. And this is why we believe a new type of regimes should really be the law of the land. If indeed there would be structural changes, more open societies, women empowerment, better education for all, which would also elevate the economic standards of living for all, I think that would lend itself to a much more peaceful society.
Who in the Palestinian leadership would you want to negotiate with? Who do you think would be a fair broker?
Naturally, I cannot appoint the Palestinian interlocutors. It's up for the Palestinians to do. But
it's clear it's not going to be Yasser Arafat.
It is clear, yes, it is clear. Arafat, as we speak, supports terrorism.
So who would you want to talk to?
Well, I do not want to name personalities, but I would say it should be I would say the character should be someone who believes in peace, someone who is in control, someone who is sustainably and effectively controls the terror and fight it as they have taken upon themselves to do. By the way, we do have all the vehicles installed. Israel has accepted the roadmap to peace, which was underwritten by basically the entire international community, United States, Russia, EU, and the UN. And in the roadmap, there is a clear call, prescription for a sweeping reforms, political, security, and economic reforms on the Palestinian side. If this happens, and this will produce a democratic leadership, then certainly we will be able to negotiate with them and cut a deal, which we are really wanting to do. This is our interest to do it, and as we have proven in the past, Egypt, Jordan, when we had the right partner, we did it.
If you've just joined us, our conversation is with the Israeli ambassador to the United States. We'll next hear from Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you. I just wanted to support Ambassador Ayalon. Wanted to say that Yasser Arafat is really not a partner for peace, and he proved it over and over again. I believe that his makeup, his chemistry, the way that he behaves, just will not tolerate peace. He just survives on hatred, survives on the whole conflict is part of his makeup, and I don't think that he would be able to survive, not politically, but with himself. I don't think that he will be able to survive with himself, giving up peace and giving up the conflict once and for all. And I believe that this is the reason why he pulled out of the Camp David agreement, is because he could not sign on a dotted line agreeing that this conflict is resolved and forever the Palestinians will not have any issue with the Israelis.
Thank you.
Yes, this is a very good point. And Steve, I would like here maybe just to illustrate in an historic, in a very specific example. People ask, why did the Camp David 2000 failed, whereby the Camp David in 1979 with Begin, Carter, and Sadat did succeed? And I say, in a nutshell, it was a difference of leadership. Back in '78, when Anwar Sadat, President Sadat, decided to go and sign a peace treaty with Israel, he did it prevailing over his closest advisors, who in protest, some of them resigned. They didn't want him to sign the peace, and it was a leadership decision to do it. He signed the peace, and we have the peace now for more than 25 years. In the case of Arafat in 2000, most, I would say all, but all of his advisors besieged him, begged him to sign, to take the offer of Prime Minister Barak, and he didn't. So this is the difference right there, and it is the leadership. And he is the one who introduced the suicide bombing, the armed struggle, the incitement, the hatred, and he does it on a regular basis, and he does it as we speak. And that's why it is very imperative that the Palestinians do what they are compelled to do by the roadmap that nominally they have accepted. And that is a new leadership which is not compromised by terror, corruption, and all other things.
Richard Wheeler from Sacramento, California says the Arabs have been murdering Jews for decades with the excuse that the Jews are attacking them. What a joke. Israel was a barren land given to the Jews by the League of Nations, only to have the British take away 2/3 of it so that the Brits could get more oil. Ever since the Jews declared the portion left as theirs, the Arabs have been attacking and murdering them. Another view from a viewer in Miami, Florida, said the idea of government of Israel is to create a wall that imprisons the Palestinian people. Peace will not come to this land till Israel changes from a Jewish to a state that represents all those inhabitants of the land. And we'll get a call from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Good morning.
Good morning. A few comments. I hope I can get them in because it's such a broad and interesting topic, really. But one of the things I wanted to say was that while it was stated earlier, there's never been a place called Palestine, and I realize I'm paraphrasing there a little bit, but in ancient times, there was a place, there was a land called Palestine. Also, I think that the atrocities of innocents being killed is happening on both sides of literally, I guess, the wall as it is now. And it just seems to me that the answer is not in military. Israel is the only nuclear power in the Middle East, which I think presents a lot of not only an intimidation factor, but a fear factor by other Arab nations.
Caller, I'll stop you there because we're running short on time, and we'll get a response. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and I really like this historic perspective. You're right. There was a place called Palestine after there was a place called Israel, and Judea or Zion. And the name Palestine, for your viewers, was given actually by a Roman emperor who conquered, with the rest of the Roman conquerors of the conquest in the Middle East. They also conquered Israel. They changed the name to Palestine in order to sever the ties between the Jewish population and the land. So they expelled all the lands. The same way they tried to change the name of Jerusalem to Ilia Capitolina, but this didn't take by history. Palestine did stick, but this is beside the point, just to talk about history. But we are not going to solve the dispute if we would dwell on history, of the respective narratives of each nation. We are respecting the Palestinians as we would like them to respect us, and let's talk about the future. There is a great future for all of us, with prosperity, with security, with stability. We are willing to make the concessions. If they are willing to do that, if they will stop the terrorism, then we can talk. You cannot negotiate by day and get killed by night. If they are willing to talk, we will talk, and we can reach peace, a lasting peace, a genuine one, with security and justice and honor for all.
Last email with a quick response from this viewer. Could you talk about the birth rates in Israel?
Yes, well, the birth rate in Israel is about 2.5%, 3%, which is more than the average for a Western democracy, but it is still far lagging what we have in the Middle Eastern societies around us, which lends itself to a demographic question. But I don't think this would be relevant because since we are very much committed to secure a political solution of a two-state. I don't think the demographic issue will be relevant to that, as we are not going to incorporate all the Palestinians into Israel. We don't think it's right, and Israel has accepted the notion of two-state solution, including an independent Palestinian state. And Prime Minister Sharon has accepted that, and we have accepted the roadmap. It's just a matter of time to find a negotiator with whom to trade the risks and take the concessions.
Ambassador Ayalon, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Tomorrow morning on C-SPAN's Washington Journal, we'll continue the discussion on 2004 politics, and we'll be joined by Senator